Have you ever had that feeling deep in your gut that you're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers? It is so frustrating. You're there thinking 3, 4 moves ahead, trying to see the whole board, and they're just hopping in a straight line. Well, this isn't just some metaphor for a bad day at the office. It's a real fundamental clash in how we see the world. And today we're going to explore it through one of the most controversial and honestly fascinating scientific ideas of the last 50 years. Everything kicks off with a puzzle that has been bugging biologists for a solid century. I want you to really think about this for a second. You, me, every person on this planet, we all started as just one single cell. So how on earth does that one cell, with just one set of DNA instructions, know how to build something as unbelievably complex as a human being? How does it sculpt a hand, wire up a brain, or teach a heart the rhythm of its first beat? That's the missing blueprint problem. And for some thinkers, the standard answers just weren't adding up. And this brings us to our main character, Rupert Sheldrake. Now, let's be super clear here. This guy was no amateur hanging out on the fringes. We are talking about a Cambridge-trained biologist, a PhD in biochemistry, a research fellow of the Royal Society. I mean, these are serious credentials. But the more he studied how living things take their shape, the more he couldn't shake this nagging feeling that a huge piece of the puzzle was just missing. So here is the absolute core of Sheldrake's issue with the textbook explanation. Yes, of course, genes are essential. Nobody's debating that. They code for proteins, which are basically the raw materials of life. But as he so brilliantly put it, that's like having a full inventory for a brand new skyscraper. You've got all the steel, all the glass, all the concrete listed out perfectly, but you have no actual blueprint. The genes give you the what, the building blocks. But he argued something else, something totally different, must be providing the how. That how is a process called morphogenesis. And for him, it remained a deep, profound mystery. Okay, so if the master blueprint isn't written in the genes, then where could it possibly be? Sheldrake's answer was so out there, so radical, it basically blew the doors off of mainstream biology. He proposed that the blueprint isn't inside the organism at all, it's outside, in a kind of invisible organizing field that guides development from afar. You can think of it like nature's Wi-Fi. He gave them a name, morphic fields. The core idea is that every single species, and get this, not just species, but also things like crystals, molecules, even whole societies, has its own invisible field. It's like a shared cloud storage for memory and form. This field doesn't just hold the 3D blueprint for physical shape, but it also contains the patterns for instinct and behavior. It's a collective memory that every member of a species both downloads from and, crucially, uploads back to. It's nature's internet, constantly syncing information across time and space. All right, this is a super important point of clarification, so let's pause here. Mainstream biology already used a similar term, morphogenetic field, but it meant something completely different. For a biologist, it's just a localized physical group of cells in an embryo that are destined to become a specific part, like an arm or a leg. Sheldrake took that existing term and basically supersized it into this universal, non-physical, species-wide information network. As you can probably guess, that did not go over well. For many scientists, just co-opting the term like that was an immediate giant red flag. So how does this nature's Wi-Fi actually work? How is the data transmitted? The proposed mechanism is called morphic resonance, and it's a wild idea. It's the principle that once a pattern of activity is established, it becomes easier for that same pattern to happen again in the future. The more rats that learn a specific maze, for example, the easier it becomes for all future rats everywhere to learn that same maze, because a habit is literally forming in this collective field. This leads to a truly mind-bending conclusion. The so-called laws of nature might not be fixed, eternal rules at all. They could just be cosmic habits, built up over billions of years since the Big Bang. Invisible fields, cosmic habits. I know. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel. So you've got to be asking, what's the evidence? Well, this is where the theory comes crashing down from the cosmos and right into our living rooms, with something as familiar as the bond between you and a pet. So let's meet Sheldrake's star witness in this whole affair, a little terrier named JT. His owner started noticing something uncanny. The dog would get up and go wait by the window for her at the exact moment she decided to head home, even when she was miles away with no fixed schedule. Was it just a coincidence? Some weird canine sixth sense? Or was it just maybe something more? Sheldrake decided to put this to a proper scientific test. He designed experiments that were videotaped and randomized.
He had the owner come home in a taxi to rule out the dog just hearing the sound of her specific car. The videotapes were then scored by independent observers who had zero idea when she was supposed to return. And according to Sheldrake's analysis, the data was unmistakable. JT consistently began waiting by the window the moment his owner started her journey home, far beyond what you'd expect from chance. It pointed to a type of connection that our conventional science simply has no explanation for.
Now, the perfect story to illustrate morphic resonance is the famous 100th monkey effect. You've probably heard this one before. The story goes that once a certain number of monkeys on one island learned to wash their sweet potatoes in the sea, suddenly monkeys on totally separate islands, with no contact, spontaneously picked up the same skill. It's a fantastic, memorable story, and it has also been thoroughly debunked. The real skill transfer was much slower and happened through totally conventional means. This really highlights a central challenge for Sheldrake. His best and most popular analogies often lean on stories that, unfortunately, don't quite hold up under scrutiny.
So what do we have? We've got a seriously wild theory, some very intriguing but hotly contested animal experiments, and a connection to some pop science myths. As you might imagine, the scientific establishment didn't just disagree with all this. They unleashed an absolute intellectual firestorm.
This quote right here, it says everything you need to know about the reaction. When Sheldrake's first book was published, the editor of Nature, the most prestigious science journal on the entire planet, wrote a now infamous editorial. He called the book an exercise in pseudoscience and said it was the best candidate for book burning he'd seen in years. I mean, that's not just a bad review. That is a declaration of scientific war.
The scientific pushback has always been fierce, and it really boils down to a few key points. Critics argue there is just no conclusive, repeatable evidence for any of it. They say it directly contradicts everything we know about the fundamentals of genetics and neuroscience. But maybe the most damning criticism of all is that the theory is just too vague and, worst of all, unfalsifiable. In the world of science, that is the kiss of death. If there's no experiment you can design that could possibly prove your theory wrong, then you're not really doing science anymore.
This table lays the conflict out in stark terms. Take memory. Mainstream science says your memories are stored physically in the neural networks of your brain. Sheldrake says your brain is more like a TV receiver, tuning in to memories that exist out in a non-local field. For inheritance, biology points to DNA and epigenetics. Sheldrake points to this collective, resonant memory. And on the very laws of nature themselves, science sees them as fixed, unchanging principles. Sheldrake sees them as evolving cosmic habits. These aren't just minor disagreements on the details. They're fundamentally incompatible views of how reality works.
So what's the final verdict? Is Rupert Sheldrake a misunderstood visionary or a brilliant charlatan? The debate still rages on. But for our purposes today, the answer to that question doesn't actually matter. Because the real lesson here isn't about whether morphic fields are real or not. It's about what this entire decades-long firestorm truly represents.
What we are really looking at here is a battle. But it's not just a battle between two scientific theories. It's a battle between two fundamentally different ways of seeing reality itself. It's a massive collision between two distinct methods for making sense of the world and for solving problems, whether those problems are in a high-tech science lab or in our own messy daily lives. And learning to see this clash is a kind of superpower. On one side of this clash, you have the machine view, which has pretty much dominated science for the last few centuries. It sees the universe as a giant, intricate clockwork mechanism. It's predictable, you can break it down into its component parts, and it's governed by fixed, unbreakable laws. This is the game of checkers. Straightforward rules, clear cause and effect. But on the other side, you have Sheldrake's organism view. This sees the universe as a living, growing thing. It's holistic, interconnected, and it evolves. This is the game of chess, complex, dynamic, where every single piece affects the entire board. And this right here is the crucial takeaway for all of us. Applying a simple, mechanical, checkers way of thinking to a complex, interconnected chess kind of problem is an absolute recipe for disaster. The entire Sheldrake saga, whether he's ultimately proven right or wrong, serves as a giant warning sign. It forces us to stop and ask ourselves, when you face your next challenge, at work, in a relationship with your own health, which game are you actually playing, and what critical information might you be missing by assuming it's the simpler one? If you want to get better at telling the difference, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Let's figure it out together.